My father gave me a strict order. Do not show up at the gala and embarrass him in front of his new billionaire partner. He had no idea that same man was currently walking into my boardroom to sign the biggest deal of my career. He was terrified I would say the wrong thing, never realizing his ultimate humiliation would come from the fact that he had not asked me a single right question in 10 years. Harper Bennett, are you listening to me? My father's voice cracked through the receiver, sharp and thin, vibrating with the specific frequency of anxiety he saved for high-stakes social climbing. I am listening, Dad, I said. I held the phone away from my ear, watching the lights of the Denver skyline blur against the floor-to-ceiling glass of my office. It was 7 in the evening, and the city below looked like a motherboard of gold and white circuitry. Good, because I need to be absolutely clear about this, Ethan Bennett said. I could hear the rustle of fabric in the background, likely him fussing with his tuxedo tie in front of the hallway mirror while my mother hovered with a lint roller. Do not come to the Langford Gala tonight. I know you got an invite through that alumni association of yours, but do not use it. I signed the document in front of me, a transfer authorization for $3 million in server infrastructure, without breaking my rhythm. I already told you I have work. Dad, I am not coming. It is not just about you being busy. Harper, he pressed, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. It is about the guest list. Damian Crowell is going to be there. Tonight is the night I finally solidify the partnership. The man practically bought half the city last year. He is serious capital, real power. I cannot have you there. Hovering. Hovering. That was the word he always used for me, as if my presence were a smudge on a camera lens, distracting from the main subject. The main subject, of course, being the Bennett family image, polished, old money adjacent, and devoid of the messy, sharp-edged daughter who worked in tech. You do not have to worry, I said, my voice flat. I will stay out of your light. Good, he exhaled, the relief audible. Madeline is wearing that silk gown Grant bought her. She looks the part. We just need everything to be perfect. Do not take this personal. Harper, you know how you get. You are intense. Damian Crowell is a man of refinement. He does not want to talk about algorithms or whatever it is you are doing with those computers. Understood, I said. Have a good night, Ethan. I ended the call before he could say anything else. The office went silent instantly. I placed the phone face down on the mahogany conference table. The room was vast, cool, and smelled faintly of leather and ozone. Behind my desk, framed in simple black wood, hung a copy of the Capitol Record. It was last month's issue. The cover story was about the silent revolution in automated logistics. There was no photo of me on the cover, just a graphic of a digital supply chain. But my name was in the first paragraph. My father did not read the Capitol Record. He read Architectural Digest and the Society pages. I stood up and walked to the window. My reflection ghosted against the glass. I was 34 years old, wearing a charcoal blazer that cost more than my father's first car, and I was the CEO of Nimbus Root AI. We did not just do computers, we built the neural networks that decided how food, medicine, and raw materials moved across the North American continent. My father thought he was playing in the big leagues because he was developing a mid-sized commercial complex near the airport. He had no idea that the refinement he worshipped was built on the kind of ruthless efficiency I engineered every day. The glass door to my office slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss. Elena, my executive assistant, walked in. She was carrying a tablet and a double-shot espresso. She did not look like she had been working for 12 hours, which was exactly why I paid her double the market rate. The final board packets are prepped, Elena said, placing the coffee near my hand. And I confirmed the security clearance for the guest list tomorrow morning. Do you want to review the seating chart again? No need, I said, turning back to the room. Is he confirmed? Elena tapped her screen. Confirmed as of 10 minutes ago, Damian Crowell, accompanied by his CFO, Elliot Vance, and his Chief Operating Officer, Rosa Klein, They will be arriving at 8 o'clock sharp. Mr. Crowell's team specifically requested that you lead the presentation. Apparently, he wants to hear the integration strategy directly from the architect. I nodded slowly. Damien Crowell, the billionaire my father was currently terrified of offending. The man my father thought was a god walking among mortals. Tomorrow morning. That god was coming to my boardroom to ask me if I would allow his logistics empire to merge its data backbone with my platform. It was a deal that would increase the valuation of Nimbus Route by 40% overnight. Does he know? I asked, half to myself. Does who know what? Elena asked. Does Damien Crowell know that the desperate real estate developer pestering him for capital is my father? Elena smirked, a tiny professional crack in her armor. Mr. Crowell's due diligence team is thorough. Harper, they know what you ate for breakfast in 1999. But professionally? It has not come up. You kept the name Bennett, but it is a common name. And considering your father has never once been listed as a shareholder or an advisor in our filings, there is no paper trail connecting you two professionally. Keep it that way, I said. Tomorrow is about the merger, not family therapy. My phone buzzed again on the table. A text message. I glanced at it. It was from my mother. Diane, hope you are eating something decent. Please stay home tonight and get some rest. Let your sister shine for once. She needs this network for Grant's campaign. Do not make it about you. I stared at the screen. Let your sister shine. I did not feel angry. I did not feel the urge to throw the phone or scream. I felt a familiar, cold sensation in my chest, like a heavy steel door slamming shut and the tumblers locking into place. They wanted me to be invisible? Fine. I had become so good at being invisible that they did not even see the empire I had built right next to their playground. Elena, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Pull up the legal conflict check file again. The one legal sent over this afternoon regarding the Crowell logistics assets. Elena frowned, tapping her tablet rapidly. The risk assessment? I thought we cleared the red flags on the environmental liabilities. We did, I said, walking back to my desk and sitting down. I unlocked my laptop, the blue light washing over my face. But I saw something in the appendix, a list of subsidiary partnerships involving their warehouse expansion in the Harbor District. I want to double-check a name. I opened the file. It was a dense PDF, hundreds of pages of corporate structures and liability clauses. I scrolled down to page 214, and there it was. It was a single-line item in a spreadsheet of third-party contractors for a stalled development project under Crowell's umbrella, a project labeled high risk due to zoning disputes and potential litigation. Minority partner/local developer, Bennett Harbor Properties. I stopped breathing for a second. My father was not just pitching Damien Crowell. My father was already in bed with him, stuck in a toxic asset that Crowell was likely trying to offload or liquidate. Ethan Bennett thought he was climbing a ladder, but he was actually standing on a trapdoor, and tomorrow morning, I was the one who was going to be holding the lever. I looked up at the darkened window, where the city lights were starting to burn brighter. My father is terrified I'm going to embarrass him, I whispered to the empty room. He thought the worst thing I could do was spill a drink or say the wrong thing about the opera. He had no idea. He did not realize that the thing that was going to embarrass him most was not my clumsiness. It was his own blindness. He was terrified of the wrong Bennett. If you want to understand why my father thought a logistical algorithm was nothing more than a glorified calculator, you have to look at my sister. Madeline Bennett is a masterpiece of social engineering. She is 2 years older than me and has never worked a day in her life, at least not in the way the IRS would define it. Her career is existing. She married Grant Wexler when she was 24. The Wexlers are the kind of family whose name is chiseled into the stone archways of local libraries and hospital wings. They do not have jobs. They have legacies. Madeline lives in the Gated Oaks compound, drives a white Range Rover that has never seen a speck of mud, and spends her Tuesdays organizing silent auctions for diseases she cannot pronounce. To my parents, She is the sun around which the Bennett solar system revolves. She is the proof that they did a good job. She followed the script. She joined the right tennis club. She befriended the right heiresses. She married the right wallet. I was the glitch in the code. My definition of success involved sleepless nights, 3 rounds of brutal venture capital pitching, and an ulcer I developed at age 29. My parents' definition of success was a photo in the Sunday Society pages. I remember a dinner from 3 years ago. It was my mother's birthday. We were at a French bistro where the menu did not list prices. I had just closed Nimbus Root's Series B funding round. We had raised $40 million. It was the moment I knew my company was not just going to survive. It was going to eat the market alive. I was vibrating with adrenaline. I wanted to share it. I wanted to put that victory on the table like a trophy. "I have some news," I had said, waiting for the appetizers to clear. The funding round closed today. The valuation came in at $200 million. There was a silence. It lasted exactly long enough for my mother to pick a piece of lint off her napkin. "That is nice, dear," she said, her eyes drifting immediately to my sister. "Madeline, did you decide on the florists for the gala next month? The hydrangeas looked a little wilted last year." I sat there, the number 200 million dying in my throat. My father took a sip of his wine and looked at me with a vague, pitying expression. "So the computer business is paying the rent then? You are sure it is stable? You know, real estate is tangible. Harper, brick and mortar, land, you can touch it, codes and internet things. They disappear. It is not just internet things, Dad," I tried to explain. "It is supply chain optimization. We are efficient." Sure, he waved a hand, dismissing the industry I was currently reshaping. "Just make sure you save some money. Do not count your chickens." That was the dynamic. I could build a skyscraper, but if it did not have a ballroom for them to dance in, they would just ask why I did not build a country club instead. Ethan Bennett had spent 40 years in commercial real estate, hovering in the orbit of true wealth without ever actually landing on the planet. He was a broker, a middleman, a guy who knew a guy. He wore the right suits and leased the right car, but he was always the one arranging the deal, never the one signing the check. He lived in a perpetual state of almost. He was almost a partner. He was almost a developer. He was almost rich. That insecurity made him hungry, and hunger makes people blind. 6 months ago, that hunger finally got fed. He came home one evening looking like he had just won the lottery. He told us he had secured a partnership with Damian Crowell, to my father. Damian Crowell was not just a businessman. He was a deity. Crowell Industries owned shipping fleets, data centers, and enough commercial square footage to house a small nation. Damian sees the potential in the harbor project, Ethan had bragged, pouring himself a scotch with trembling hands. "He is putting up the capital. I am handling the local development. We are partners. Diane, partners." From that day on, every conversation I had with my father was a monologue about Damian. Damian likes his steak rare. Damian thinks the market is correcting. Damian invited me to the box seats at the stadium. He called me twice a week, not to ask how I was doing, but to drop Damian's name into the air and watch it float. He never asked about Nimbus Root. He never asked about the rumors that a major tech giant was trying to acquire us. To him, I was still just his quirky daughter playing with computers while the adults did business. I stopped trying to correct him. I stopped trying to seek his validation. It is a hard lesson to learn, that you cannot buy respect from people who only deal in a currency you do not carry. I had stopped bringing up my wins. I let them think I was struggling. I let them think I was getting by. But silence allows you to hear things others miss. I looked down at the legal file open on my desk. The conflict check was standard procedure for the merger meeting tomorrow, a dull necessity of due diligence. But the data on page 214 was screaming at me. The entry detailed a subsidiary of Crowell Logistics called Crowell Bayview Holdings. It was a shell company created to manage a specific tract of industrial land near the old naval yard. The file was flagged red. Status, toxic asset, environmental remediation required, zoning litigation pending, and right next to it, listed as the minority partner and project manager of record, was Bennett Harbor Properties. My father's company. My stomach turned over. Ethan had not been brought in because he was a brilliant developer. He had been brought in to hold the bag. Damian Crowell was smart, ruthless. He knew that the harbor project was a regulatory nightmare. If the EPA came knocking, or if the zoning board sued, Crowell wanted a layer of insulation between his main holdings and the disaster. He needed a local face to take the heat. A patsy who was desperate enough for the association that he would sign anything just to see his name next to a billionaire's. Ethan thought he was standing on the podium. In reality, he was standing on a trapdoor, and Damian Crowell had his finger on the release catch. My father was so obsessed with the appearance of power that he had failed to read the fine print of his own destruction. He was bragging about a partnership that was designed to bankrupt him. I closed the laptop. The glowing Apple logo faded to black. My father thought I was the one who needed protection. He thought I was the embarrassment. He had spent his life chasing the kind of people who would eat him alive, while ignoring the daughter who had learned how to hunt the eaters. Tomorrow, Damian Crowell was coming to my table. He was coming to ask for my technology, and I was the only one in the room who knew that the man my father worshipped was about to sacrifice him for a tax write-off. I picked up my pen and tapped it against the desk. The rhythm was steady, like a clock ticking down. I was not going to save Ethan because he was my father. I was going to handle this because it was a liability to my merger. But as I sat there in the dark, I realized something else. Dad wanted to be a big shot. He wanted to play in the major leagues. Well, tomorrow morning, he was going to find out exactly how the game was played, and he was not going to like the score. At 8:30 in the evening, the grand ballroom of the Langford Hotel was a sea of black ties, emerald silk, and the specific, hollow roar of 200 people trying to impress one another. Across town, in the climate-controlled silence of a data center in the tech district, I was standing in a server aisle with the vice president of operations for a national grocery chain. The air here was kept at a crisp 65 degrees and smelled of ozone and ionized dust. It was not as glamorous as the Langford, but the contract I was about to countersign was worth more than the net worth of half the people drinking champagne at that party. The redundancy systems look solid. Harper, the VP said, tapping a tablet screen. If we migrate the Western Region logistics to Nimbus route, you are guaranteeing a 14% drop in spoilage? 14% is the floor, I corrected him, keeping my voice low and steady. Our simulations suggest 18% within the first quarter. That is roughly $12 million in saved inventory annually. He nodded, impressed. There was no music playing here, no appetizers being passed around on silver trays, just the hum of cooling fans and the sound of money actually being made. At that exact moment, 5 miles away, my father was likely straightening his bow tie and scanning the room for someone more important than the person he was currently talking to. I checked my phone while the VP reviewed the final clauses. A notification from Instagram popped up. It was my mother. She had posted a photo. It was a selfie, heavily filtered, taken in the ballroom foyer. She and my father were beaming, their teeth whitened to an unnatural brightness. Standing between them, looking slightly bored but polite, was Damian Crowell. The caption read, "Celebrating success with our dear friend and partner Damian. Big things coming for the Bennett family. Power circle, blessed legacy." I stared at the screen. They looked like they belonged. They looked like the perfect trio of success. My sister, Madeline, was visible in the background, laughing with her head thrown back, a glass of Prosecco in her hand, looking every bit the socialite she was bred to be. I swiped the notification away and put the phone in my pocket. "Ready to sign?" I asked the VP. "Ready," he said. While I was capping my pen, the scene at the Langford was playing out exactly as I had predicted. I know this because the transcript of the evening would eventually make its way back to me. Piece by piece, through the grapevine of a city that is smaller than it pretends to be. Ethan Bennett was holding court near the ice sculpture. He had cornered a group of local investors, people who had money, but not Crowell money. He was high on the fumes of his new proximity to power. Damien and I were just discussing the harbor expansion, Ethan was saying, his voice booming slightly too loud. It is all about vision. You have to see what isn't there yet. That is what separates the developers from the builders. Damien Crowell drifted into the circle then. He moved with the quiet, predatory grace of a man who owned the building. The chatter died down instantly. "Ethan," Damien said, nodding. He held a glass of mineral water, untouched. "Damien," my father beamed, gesturing grandly. "I was just telling these gentlemen about the complexity of the zoning permits we navigated." "Indeed," Damien said. His eyes swept the group, cool and detached. Then, perhaps out of boredom, or perhaps because he was already running his own background checks in real time, he looked at my father. "I noticed your other daughter is not here tonight. Harper, is it?" My father's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered. He waved a hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "Oh, Harper," he chuckled. "You know how millennials are. She is finding herself." Madeline, who had glided over to join the circle, chimed in. She rested a hand on her husband's arm and offered a sympathetic pout. "Harper is a bit of a recluse. I am afraid. She gets anxious in crowds. She prefers her little projects." "Projects?" Damien asked. The word was neutral, but his attention sharpened. "Computer stuff," Ethan said quickly, eager to steer the conversation back to himself. "Tech support, coding, that sort of thing. She is working for some startup downtown. We try to be supportive, but you know how volatile that industry is. She is still fumbling, struggling to get her footing." Loe hoi was a Vietnamese phrase my father had butchered, meaning struggling or fumbling about. He used it whenever he wanted to sound worldly, but he only ever used it to describe me. Damien did not laugh. He did not smile. He took a slow sip of his water. "A startup," Damien repeated. "Which one?" It was a simple question, a polite question, the kind of question a business partner asks to show interest in the other person's life. Ethan froze. I can picture the panic rising in his chest. He realized, in front of the most powerful man in the city, that he did not actually know the name of the company where his daughter spent 12 hours a day. He knew it had AI in it maybe, or root, or was it cloud? "It is one of those data firms." Ethan fumbled, his confidence evaporating. "Nimbus something? Small operation. They do server maintenance, I believe." "She fixes the internet," Madeline added helpfully, laughing lightly. "We are just glad she has health insurance." Damien Crowell stared at my father. He held the gaze for 3 long seconds. In the business world, 3 seconds of silence is an eternity. It is an interrogation in that silence. Damien confirmed everything he needed to know. He realized that the man standing in front of him, the man claiming to be a partner, a visionary, a family man, was a fraud. Ethan did not just lack business acumen, he lacked basic awareness. He did not know that his struggling daughter was the CEO of the company Damien was waking up early tomorrow to acquire. "Interesting," Damien said finally. His tone was dry, stripped of any warmth. "Very interesting." He turned away without another word, leaving my father standing there with a frozen smile, wondering if he had said something wrong, but too arrogant to realize he had just failed the most basic test of character. Back in the data center, the lights of the server racks blinked in a hypnotic rhythm. Blue, green, amber. The VP had left. The contract was signed. And I was alone in the humming corridor. My phone vibrated again. This time, it was an email. It was from my chief legal officer. The subject line was simply, "Urgent. Conflict analysis / Crowell Bayview." I opened it. The text was brief and devastating. "Harper, following your request. We dug deeper into the Bennett Harbor Properties Association. It is worse than we thought. The partnership agreement your father signed assigns 100% of the environmental liability to the minority partner in exchange for a higher percentage of future and highly theoretical profits. If the EPA finds that site, Crowell walks away clean. Your father is on the hook for approximately $15 million in cleanup costs. This is not a partnership, it is a liability dump. I lowered the phone. The air conditioning vents blasted cold air down on me, but I felt a sudden flush of heat. It was not anger, it was a strange, heavy sadness. My father was at a party right now, drinking expensive champagne, telling people I fixed computers for a living, and feeling superior. He thought he was protecting his reputation by keeping me away. He thought he was the one in control. He did not understand that the man he was trying to impress was playing him for a fool. And he did not understand that the daughter he was ashamed of was the only person on earth with the leverage to save him. I looked out the narrow window at the end of the aisle. The city lights were a blur of gold and white. Somewhere out there, at the Langford Grand, the gala was winding down. I turned off my phone screen. The reflection in the black glass stared back at me, calm, tired, and resolved. "So that is it," I said softly to the empty room. "You did not just miss out on my life, Dad. You are about to drown, and you are too busy checking your reflection in the mirror to notice the water rising." I walked out of the server room, the heavy steel door clicking shut behind me. The silence of the night felt different now. It was no longer the silence of exclusion. It was the silence before the storm, and I was the one bringing the thunder. The sun had not yet crested the Rocky Mountains when I walked into the Nimbus Route headquarters. It was 6 a.m. The building was silent, save for the rhythmic hum of the HVAC systems and the soft squeak of my heels on the polished concrete floor. I did not feel tired. I felt the cold, crystalline clarity that comes before a battle. In the executive conference room on the 42nd floor, my war counsel was already waiting. Marcus, my chief financial officer, was pouring black coffee into a paper cup. Julian, my general counsel, was organizing a stack of files that looked thick enough to stop a bullet. Sarah, the chief operating officer, was staring at the projection screen where a map of Crowell Logistics' North American supply chain was glowing in neon blue. "Good morning," I said, dropping my leather portfolio onto the table. "Tell me we are ready." Marcus looked up, his face grim. "The valuation models held up overnight. If we integrate Crowell's trucking fleet with our dynamic routing AI, we cut their fuel costs by 22% in the first year. That is roughly $80 million in pure margin. It is a home run. Harper, on paper." "On paper," I repeated. I sat down at the head of the table. "Now tell me about the ink underneath the paper." Julian slid a folder across the mahogany surface. It was the expanded version of the conflict check I had glanced at the night before. "We scrubbed the asset list again," Julian said, his voice dry and clinical. "Most of Crowell's portfolio is clean: warehouses, fleet vehicles, distribution hubs, but there is a tumor." "The Bayview Harbor project," I said. Julian nodded. "Correct. It is a 60-acre industrial site near the old rail yards. Crowell Logistics lists it as a strategic development asset. In reality, it is a regulatory time bomb. The soil is contaminated from industrial runoff in the 80s. The EPA has been circling it for months. The estimated cleanup cost is somewhere between $10 and $20 million. I looked at the map on the screen. A tiny red dot blinked near the coastline. "And here is the kicker," Julian continued, tapping a specific page in the file. "Crowell isn't the developer of record anymore. 6 months ago, they brought in a local partner to handle the site management and remediation. They transferred the operational liability to this partner in exchange for a 50% stake in future profits. The partner is Bennett Harbor Properties," I said. The room went silent. Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look. They knew who Bennett Harbor Properties belonged to. I had never hidden my background, even if I never leveraged it. "Yes," Julian said softly. "Your father signed an indemnity clause. It is standard for high-risk development. But this one is aggressive. If the EPA levies a fine, or if the cleanup goes over budget, the operating partner, your father, is responsible for the first $15 million of coverage. He does not have $15 million, I said flatly. He barely has $15,000 in liquid assets. He is leveraged to the hilt on commercial loans. Then he goes bankrupt, Julian stated. And if we acquire Crowell Logistics without carving this asset out, the liability doesn't just disappear. If your father defaults, the EPA comes after the parent company. That would be us. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My father thought he had been invited to the table because he was a player. He thought Damien Crowell respected his vision. In reality, Damien had handed him a grenade with the pin pulled out, patted him on the back, and walked away to a safe distance. Ethan Bennett was not a partner. He was a human shield. Damien is smart, Sarah muttered. He dumps the toxic asset on a local dreamer, waits for the cleanup to bankrupt him, and then buys the land back for pennies on the dollar once the legal dust settles. It is strictly business, I said. My voice surprised me. It sounded completely detached. If I were Damien, I would have done the same thing. It is ruthless, but it is efficient. So, what is the play? Marcus asked. Do we kill the deal? No, I said immediately. We need those trucks. We need that infrastructure. Nimbus Route needs the physical reach to match our digital brain. We are not letting my father's incompetence cost us $1 billion merger. I looked at Julian. We structure a firewall. Julian clicked his pen. Go on. We insert a specific exclusion clause in the acquisition agreement, I directed, my mind moving like a chess piece. We explicitly reject the Bayview Harbor asset. We force Crowell to retain it personally or divest it elsewhere, and to ensure there is no bleed over, we add a non-interference and anti-nepotism rider. That is aggressive, Julian warned. You are effectively telling Damien Crowell that you know his game, and you are legally barring your own family from doing business with the merged entity. Exactly, I said. The rider will state that no immediate family member of the executive board can hold vendor or partner status with the company. It frames it as a corporate governance issue. It looks like I am being a stickler for ethics. In reality, I am cutting the rope that ties my father to this sinking ship. If the deal goes through with that clause, the partnership between Crowell and my father becomes void by default of our compliance standards. It saves your father from the liability, Sarah noted. I am not doing it to save him, I corrected her. I am doing it to save my stock price. If he survives, that is just collateral damage. I checked my watch. 7:45. The sun was fully up now, bathing the boardroom in harsh, revealing light. Down on the street, Damien Crowell's black SUV would be turning the corner in exactly 15 minutes. Draft the clauses, I ordered. Have the revised term sheet ready on the table when they walk in. And Elena? My assistant's voice came over the intercom. Yes, Harper? When we arrange the agenda, schedule a 10-minute private session between myself and Mr. Crowell before the general vote. No lawyers, no deputies, just CEO to chairman. Understood. I stood up and walked to the head of the immense glass table. The room was pristine, not a single fingerprint on the surface. It was a cold, sterile arena where weakness was eaten for breakfast. My father belonged in country clubs and gala ballrooms, places where charm could mask incompetence. He did not belong here. I reached into my bag and pulled out my nameplate. It was a heavy block of brushed steel, the letters laser-etched in sharp, uncompromising sans-serif font. I placed it squarely at the head of the table. Harper Bennett, Chief Executive Officer. It hit the glass with a heavy, definitive thud. The sound echoed in the quiet room. It sounded like a gavel coming down. Let them in, I said. It is time to show Mr. Crowell who actually owns this city. The heavy oak double doors of the boardroom swung open at exactly 8 o'clock. There is a specific way billionaires enter a room. They do not look at their watches. They do not check to see if there are enough chairs. They simply occupy the space, assuming the physics of the room will rearrange itself to accommodate their gravity. Damien Crowell walked in first. He looked exactly as he had in the photos my mother had posted 12 hours ago, though he had traded the tuxedo for a bespoke navy suit that probably cost more than my first car. He looked rested, focused, and utterly unprepared for the reality that was waiting for him at the head of the table. Behind him trailed his entourage. Elliot Vance, his CFO, was a thin man with nervous eyes who was already clutching a binder to his chest. Rosa Klein, the COO, looked sharper, scanning the room with the predatory efficiency of someone looking for weakness. Damien was smiling as he crossed the threshold. It was a practice smile, the kind reserved for junior partners and tech upstarts he intended to acquire and dismantle. "Good morning," Damien said, his voice a rich baritone that carried easily across the 30-foot room. "I trust we are ready to—" He stopped. He was 10 feet away from where I stood. I was standing at the head of the long glass table, my hands resting lightly on the surface. I wore a cream-colored silk blouse and a sharp black blazer. My hair pulled back in a severe, precise bun. But it was not my clothes that stopped him. It was the projection screen behind me, in 5-foot-tall glowing letters. The screen read, "Nimbus Root AI, Strategic Merger Proposal, presented by Harper Bennett, CEO." Damien's eyes flicked from the screen to the nameplate on the table in front of me. Then they moved up to my face. The silence that followed was absolute. It was not just quiet, it was a vacuum. You could hear the hum of the hard drives in the server closet down the hall. For a split second, I saw the gears turning in his head. He was replaying the conversation from the gala. Ethan Bennett, the desperate developer, the phantom daughter who struggled, the girl who fixed computers, Loe Hoe. He looked at the CEO of the company currently valued at $500 million. He looked at the girl who was supposedly finding herself, and the two images crashed into each other with the force of a tectonic shift. I did not blink. I did not smile. I did not give him an inch. "Mr. Crowell," I said. My voice was calm, projecting perfectly to the back of the room without raising my volume. "Welcome to Nimbus Root. I believe you are on a tight schedule, so I suggest we skip the pleasantries and get straight to the integration architecture." I extended my hand. Damien stared at it for a fraction of a second too long. Then, instinct took over. The shock vanished behind a mask of professional neutrality. But the light in his eyes had changed. It was no longer dismissive, it was confused, and underneath the confusion, there was a spark of something dangerous. "Ms. Bennett," he said, taking my hand. His grip was firm, testing. "A pleasure." He took his seat at the opposite end of the table. His team scrambled to sit beside him, opening laptops and uncapping water bottles, oblivious to the subtext that had just sucked the oxygen out of the room. "Let us begin with the data migration protocols," I said. Tapping my tablet, the screen behind me shifted to a complex diagram of API bridges. "My team has reviewed your current logistics stack. Your legacy systems are running on a decentralized SQL architecture that dates back to 2012. That is a latency risk we cannot accept. If we proceed, we will be scraping your entire database and migrating it to our neural net within 90 days. Elliot Vance, his CFO, cleared his throat. 90 days seems aggressive. Ms. Bennett, we have 3 decades of shipping data. The security risks alone are negligible." I cut him off. I did not look at Elliot. I kept my eyes on Damien. "We use a proprietary sharding protocol that encrypts data at rest and in transit. We have run simulations on datasets 3 times the size of Crowell Logistics. The migration will be seamless. The only risk is human error on your end, which is why my team will be overseeing the transition personally." I pulled up a heat map of their trucking routes. "Furthermore, your current routing efficiency is bleeding money. You have trucks running empty on return legs 40% of the time in the Midwest corridor. Our algorithm cuts that to 8%. That is a savings of $12 million in fuel and maintenance in the first year alone. We are not just buying your trucks, gentlemen. We are buying your inefficiency and selling it back to you as profit. I spoke for 20 minutes straight. I dissected their business with the precision of a coroner. I knew their margins better than they did. I knew their weak points. I knew exactly where they were bleeding cash and exactly how my code would cauterize the wound. The room was mesmerized. My own board members were nodding, looking pleased. Rosa Klein was taking furious notes, looking impressed. But Damien Crowell was not taking notes. He was just watching me. He was studying me like a biological specimen that had suddenly evolved fangs. When I finally paused to take a sip of water, the silence returned, but this time, it was a respectful silence. I had proven that I belonged at the head of this table. Damien leaned back in his chair. He tapped a gold pen against his chin. "Your technical grasp is comprehensive," he said slowly. "I built the core engine myself," I replied. "I do not hire people to understand my product for me." Damien nodded. A small, dry smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I met a man last night," Damien said. His voice was casual, but the room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "At the Langford Gala, a real estate developer, charming man, a bit talkative." My board members looked confused. Why was he talking about a party? I placed my glass of water down on the coaster. I did not look away. "Ethan Bennett," Damien said, pronouncing the name carefully. He let the name hang in the air. He was waiting for me to flinch. He was waiting for me to apologize, or to explain, or to beg him not to mention the embarrassing connection in front of my shareholders. "Ethan Bennett is," Damien asked, leaving the question open-ended. The entire room turned to look at me. My CFO, Marcus, looked between me and Damien. Sensing a sudden spike in tension he could not explain, I stood perfectly still. "He is my father," I said. The words were flat, factual, devoid of affection or shame. A ripple of surprise went through the room. Elliot Vance's mouth opened slightly. "I see," Damien said. "However," I continued immediately, my voice hardening just enough to cut through the gossip that was starting to form in their heads. "My father works in commercial real estate. I work in predictive logistics. Our professional paths do not cross, and for the purposes of this meeting, his only relevance is genetic." I tapped the table, signaling the end of the topic. "Now, if we can turn our attention to page 15 of the term sheet, we need to discuss the indemnity clauses regarding your environmental liabilities in the Harbor District." I saw Damien's eyes widen slightly. I had just dismissed my father as a non-entity and pivoted to the exact toxic asset he was using my father to hide. It was a power move so brazen that for a moment, Damien looked genuinely stunned. He stared at me. He looked at the nameplate again. Harper Bennett. He realized then that I wasn't just the girl who fixed computers. I was the girl who had done a conflict check on her own family. The meeting continued for another hour, but the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Damien was no longer treating me like a target for acquisition. He was treating me like a threat, and in the world of high finance, being a threat is the highest form of respect. When the final agenda item was cleared, I closed my portfolio. "Thank you, everyone," I said. "We will reconvene in 1 hour for the final vote." Chairs scraped against the floor. As the executives began to file out, checking their phones and whispering, Damien remained seated. He waited until the room was half empty. "Ms. Bennett," he said. I stopped packing my bag and looked up. "Mr. Crowell? I wonder if I might borrow 5 minutes of your time," he said. He stood up and buttoned his jacket. Alone, off the record. His expression had changed completely. The polite corporate mask was gone. In its place was a look of sharp, calculating assessment. It was the look of a man who had walked into a poker game expecting to play against children, only to realize the person across from him was holding a royal flush. 5 minutes, I agreed. I gestured to the door, signaling for my own team to leave us, as the heavy doors clicked shut, leaving us alone in the soundproof glass box. I knew one thing for certain. My father had been begging for Damien's attention for 6 months. I had earned it in 60 minutes. The silence in the boardroom after the door clicked shut was heavy. But it was not the heaviness of awkwardness. It was the density of a collapsed star. The air felt charged with things that had been left unsaid for a lifetime, now suddenly crammed into a glass box on the 42nd floor. Damien Crowell stood up and walked over to the window. He looked out at the city he claimed to own half of. He did not look like a man who had just been blindsided. He looked like a man who was recalibrating his entire world view. "I have been tracking Nimbus route for 18 months, Damien said, his back turned to me. "I read your white paper on predictive supply chain algorithms when it was published in the quarterly review. I told my acquisitions team 6 months ago that whoever wrote that code was going to make the trucking industry obsolete. I knew the CEO was a woman named Harper Bennett." He turned around slowly, his face unreadable. "I just never connected the dots," he continued, "because in the 6 months I have spent listening to your father talk, and God knows, the man loves to talk. He never once mentioned that his daughter was a tech CEO. He told me you were finding your way. He implied you were struggling to pay rent." I sat at the head of the table, my hands clasped over the leather folder in front of me. He did not hide the information. Damien, that would imply he knew it and chose to conceal it. "Then what is it?" Damien asked. "He never asked," I said. "It is that simple." "He never asked." Damien walked back to the table and sat down. Not at the far end this time, but in the chair to my right. He looked at me with a strange mixture of pity and fascination. "Last night," Damien said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial register. "At the gala, your father pulled me aside near the coat check. He was desperate. He knew I was meeting with a tech company this morning to finalize an acquisition. He did not know the name, obviously, but he told me I was making a mistake." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. "What did he say?" "He said that technology is a bubble," Damien recounted. His eyes locked on mine. "He told me I should not waste $50 million on cloud magic when I could put that same capital into his harbor development. He tried to kill this deal. Harper, he tried to talk me out of acquiring your company so he could secure a second round of funding for his warehouses." I looked down at the polished mahogany table. I saw my own reflection, distorted and dark. It was one thing to be ignored. It was another thing to be actively sabotaged by your own father. Not out of malice, but out of sheer, blinding greed. He had tried to slit my throat to feed himself, without even knowing it was my neck on the block. "He does not know," I said quietly. "He thinks he is a shark. He does not realize he is just chum." "He is worse than chum," Damien said ruthlessly. "He is a liability, and that brings me to my concern. If we merge, if I bring you into the Crowell fold, I am effectively bringing him in too. I do not do business with people who lack judgment, and your father lacks judgment on a cellular level." I opened the folder in front of me. "That is why we are having this conversation. I am not asking for your permission to manage my family. I am setting terms." I slid a single sheet of paper across the glass. "This is an amendment to the shareholder agreement," I said. "It is a total separation clause. It stipulates that no immediate family member of the executive suite, specifically mine, can hold any position. Consultancy or vendor status with the new entity, no honorary titles, no board seats, no finder's fees for introductions. If my father calls you, you do not take the call. If he shows up at the lobby, security escorts him out. We codify his exclusion." Damien picked up the paper. He read it quickly, his eyebrows lifting. "You are legally barring your father from riding your coattails," he observed. "I am protecting my shareholders," I corrected him. "And I am protecting the integrity of this merger. Do we have an agreement on that?" Damien set the paper down. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. The shark was back. "I can agree to that," he said. "But if I am going to alienate a friend, even a useless one like Ethan, I need something in return. You are asking for a valuation that is 20% above market. If you want that number, I want a controlling interest in the board. 3 seats for Crowell, 2 for Bennett, and I want veto power on all R&D spending over $5 million. He was testing me. He thought that because I was willing to cut off my father, I was desperate for the deal. He thought I was emotional. I leaned back, mirroring his posture. "No," I said. Damien blinked. "No?" "The valuation is non-negotiable because my algorithm is proprietary. You are not paying for the code. You are paying for the 5 years of lead time it would take your team to replicate it. As for the board seats, we stay at an even split, and I retain absolute veto power on product roadmap and research spend. You are buying the engine. Damien, you do not get to tell the mechanic how to tune it. You are playing a hard hand for someone whose father is currently borrowing money to pay the interest on his loans," Damien said, his voice hardening. "My father's debts are not my debts," I said. "But speaking of debts," I pulled out the second document, the one with the red flag. "I noticed that Crowell Logistics is still holding the title on the land for the Bayview Harbor project," I said casually. "The one my father is currently developing for you." Damien's face went still. "That is a separate entity. It has nothing to do with this merger." "It has everything to do with it," I countered. "Because that land is a toxic waste dump. I pulled the EPA filings this morning. The soil remediation costs are projected to hit $15 million by next quarter. You transferred the operational liability to my father's company, Bennett Harbor Properties, 6 months ago. You set him up as the fall guy." Damien did not deny it. He did not look ashamed. He just looked at me with a new level of appraisal. "It was a business decision," he said. "The asset was distressed. Your father was eager." "I do not care about the morality of it," I said, matching his coldness. "I care about the balance sheet. If we merge, I do not want that asset anywhere near my company books. I want a clause that specifically excludes the Bayview project and any of its associated liabilities from the acquisition. You keep that land, or you let it sink, but it does not cross the threshold into Nimbus route." "If I keep it," Damien said slowly, "and the EPA fines come down, your father's company will be the first line of defense. He signed the indemnity. If I do not absorb it back into the parent company, he will be wiped out." He was watching me closely. He was giving me a choice. I could use the merger to save my father. I could insist that Crowell take the project back, shielding Ethan from the inevitable lawsuit, or I could protect my company and let the trap snap shut on Ethan's leg. I thought about the phone call last night. Don't embarrass me. I thought about the years of being introduced as the daughter who was struggling. I thought about him trying to kill my deal at the gala to save his own skin. "The Bayview project stays with Bennett Harbor Properties," I said firmly. "I will not dilute my company's value to subsidize a bad real estate deal. If the partner on that deal cannot cover his liabilities, that is a matter for the bankruptcy courts, not for my board of directors." Damien exhaled. It was a long, slow breath. For the first time since he walked into the room, he smiled. It was not a polite smile. It was a genuine grin of recognition. He saw the steel spine beneath the silk blouse. He saw a creature that was exactly like him. "You are willing to let him drown," Damien stated. "I am willing to let him face the consequences of his own ambition," I replied. He wanted to be a big developer. Big developers take risks. Sometimes they lose. Damien picked up his pen. He uncapped it with a decisive click. "I tried to find a successor for 5 years," Damien said, looking down at the term sheet. "I interviewed Ivy League graduates, seasoned COOs, military generals. They were all soft. They all wanted to be liked." He looked up at me. "You do not care if I like you, do you, Harper?" "I care if the check clears," I said. Damien laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. He scribbled his initials on the total separation clause and then moved to the asset exclusion section. He signed away my father's safety without a moment of hesitation, because I had given him permission to do it. He closed the folder and pushed it back to me. "We have a deal," Damien said. 50-50 board split, You retain CEO status, and the Bennett family, the other Bennett family, is officially unwelcome." He stood up and extended his hand again. This time, the handshake was different. It was an equal grip. It was a pact between two predators who had agreed to hunt together. "I have to say," Damien said, holding my gaze as he prepared to walk back out to the waiting board members, "I spent 6 months thinking I was wasting my time with the Bennett name. Turns out, I was just talking to the wrong one." He adjusted his cufflinks, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "I know exactly which Bennett I should be doing business with. Shall we tell them?" I asked, gesturing to the door. "After you, Madame CEO," he said. I walked toward the door, leaving the ghost of my father's ambitions dying on the conference table behind me. The ink on the acquisition contracts was barely dry when my phone rang. The caller ID flashed Dad. It was 2 p.m. The boardroom was empty. The lawyers had retreated to their dens to file the mountain of paperwork, and I was sitting alone in my office, watching the stock ticker for the logistics sector scroll across my monitor. I picked up the phone. "Harper!" Ethan Bennett's voice was booming, vibrating with the manic energy of a man who believes he has just won a marathon he did not actually run. "You will not believe the call I just got. 10 minutes ago, Damien Crowell personally called me." I leaned back in my chair, swiveling slowly to look at the city skyline. "Is that so?" "He was in a fantastic mood," my father gushed. "He told me he had just wrapped up some tedious administrative business and was clearing his schedule to focus on the real opportunities. He said he wants to sit down with me next week to discuss expanding the capital flow into the harbor project." "Expanding, Harper. He is talking about doubling down. I told you he sees the vision." I closed my eyes for a second. Damien Crowell was a master. He had called my father immediately after signing a document that legally barred my father from ever stepping foot in our new headquarters. He had soothed Ethan's ego, patted him on the head, and kept him calm, ensuring that Ethan would not make a scene until the press release dropped. It was not kindness. It was pest control. "Did he mention what that tedious administrative business was?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Oh, who knows?" Ethan dismissed it with a laugh. "Some tech thing. He mentioned he had to sign off on acquiring some software company this morning. Bunch of nerds and servers. He sounded bored to tears. He said, 'Ethan, I just spent 3 hours listening to people talk about algorithms, and I need a drink,' I told him. 'Damien, that is why you hire people like that, so men like us can build the real world.' The irony was so thick, I could practically taste it. The people like that he was referring to was me. The boring meeting was the one where I had just negotiated a buyout that made me one of the wealthiest women in the state. So he did not mention the name of the company? I pressed. Why does it matter? Ethan snapped, his patience fraying instantly. It is irrelevant. The point is, he is prioritizing me. Me. This is it. Harper, we are finally entering the inner circle, which reminds me. He paused, and I could hear him taking a breath to deliver his next instruction. Your mother wants to make sure you come to Sunday dinner. And please, for the love of God, wear something appropriate. None of those severe pantsuits. Wear a dress, something soft. We might invite the Wexlers over. And I do not want you looking like you just came from a funeral. I will see what I can do, I said. Don't just see, do. We are on a different level now. Harper, you need to look the part. He hung up. I stared at the phone. He was standing on a trap door. The rope was already cut, and he was lecturing me on my fashion choices. A moment later, a text message arrived from my mother. Diane Bennett. Reminder for Sunday, 6 p.m. Grant and Madeline are coming. Please do not talk about your work. Nobody understands it, and it bores Grant. Let's keep the conversation light. Dad is very happy right now. Do not ruin it with your mood. I let the phone drop onto the desk with a clatter. My mood, I whispered. The intercom on my desk buzzed. It was Elena. Harper, I have the draft of the press release from the PR team. They are queuing it up for the Beacon Finance Network wire service. It is scheduled to go live at 6 in the morning tomorrow, right before the markets open. Do you want to review the quote one last time? Send it in, I said. I opened the document on my screen. It was a standard corporate release, dry and triumphant. Nimbus Root AI to acquire Crowell Logistics fleet and historic $600 million merger. Deal includes strategic integration of AI-driven supply chain management. Harper Bennett to remain as CEO and assume chairwoman position of the new entity. There it was, my name, Damien's name. Linked together in black and white. I scrolled down to the bottom, to the Notes to Editors section. It was standard boilerplate, but hidden in the legal disclosures was the line my lawyers had insisted on. The acquisition specifically excludes the Bayview Harbor real estate assets and any associated development partnerships. That was the nail in the coffin. My sister, Madeline, called me 20 minutes later. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. I heard you are actually coming to dinner, Madeline said. Her voice was sweet, coated in the sugary condescension she had perfected in high school. I was surprised. I thought you would be too busy with your coding. I have some time, I said. Well, try to be happy for Dad, she said. Grant says it is a big deal that Damien Crowell is personally investing in him. You know, Grant played golf with Damien's lawyer once. He says Damien is very exclusive. It is honestly a miracle he gave Dad the time of day. I guess he just liked Dad's charm. She paused, waiting for me to agree. Dad has a lot of charm, I said flatly. I know it must be hard for you, Madeline sighed, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. Watching everyone else move up while you are still grinding away. But do not be jealous. Harper, your time will come. Maybe you can ask Dad to introduce you to some of Damien's IT people. They probably need technicians. I swiveled my chair again. I looked at the reflection of the room in the glass, the leather chairs, the mahogany table, the view that stretched for miles. I do not think I will need an introduction. Madeline, I said. Well, do not let pride get in the way. Anyway, gotta run. I have a fitting for the charity gala next week. Since Dad is a partner now, we have to upgrade our table. She hung up. The silence returned. I sat there for a long time. The sun began to dip below the mountains, painting the office in streaks of orange and purple. I had a choice. I could let them find out tomorrow morning. I could let my father wake up, pour his coffee, open the Beacon Finance Network app, and watch his world disintegrate in real time. I could let him read the headline and realize that the boring tech company Damien bought was mine. I could let him realize that while he was bragging about a fictional partnership, I had just become his boss's boss. It would be cruel. It would be devastating. But my lawyer, Julian, had warned me. If they find out from the news, Julian had said during the break, they might panic. They might say something stupid to the press. They might claim they were cut out unfairly. That creates a family feud narrative that scares shareholders. We need to control the spin. I needed to warn him, not because I owed him anything, but because I owed my shareholders a stable stock price. I picked up the phone again. I dialed my father's number. What is it now? Harper? He answered, sounding annoyed. I'm trying to find the vintage scotch for Sunday. Dad, I said. My voice was steady. I need to tell you something, and I need you to actually listen to me for 30 seconds. Can you do that? Make it quick. I am busy. Tomorrow morning, there is going to be an announcement in the financial news, I said. It concerns Damien Crowell. I know, he interrupted. He is announcing the harbor expansion. He told me big things were coming. No, Dad, it is not about the harbor. It is about an acquisition. The tech thing? He scoffed. Who cares? Harper, why are you obsessing over? The company he acquired is Nimbus Root, I said. There was a pause. What? Nimbus Root, I repeated. My company, Damien Crowell, signed a merger agreement with me this morning. I am taking over his logistics fleet. Silence. Then, a laugh. A short, barking laugh of disbelief. Okay, very funny, he said. You are drunk? Or is this some kind of joke? You think Damien Crowell bought your little computer shop? It is not a shop, Dad. It is a corporation, and the deal is done. I just wanted you to know before you see it on TV. Harper, stop lying. His voice turned cold. It is pathetic. You are jealous because I am the one making moves. So you make up this fantasy? Do not embarrass yourself. Go sleep it off. And do not bring this nonsense to dinner on Sunday. Click. He hung up on me. I held the phone to my ear for a moment longer, listening to the dial tone. He didn't believe me. Even when I told him the truth, point blank, he couldn't process it. His worldview was so rigid, so constructed around the idea of his own importance and my insignificance, that the truth simply bounced off him like rain off a roof. I set the phone down. I had done my duty. I had given him the warning. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 5:30 in the evening. In 12 hours and 30 minutes, the press release would hit the wire. The trading bell would ring, the world would know, and my father would finally have to look at the scoreboard. I tried, Dad, I said to the empty room. I really did. I picked up my bag, turned off the lights, and walked out of the office. The darkness behind me felt clean. The explosion was set. All that was left to do was wait for the sun to rise. At 5:45 in the morning, 15 minutes before the official press release was scheduled to hit the wire, a notification blinked on my encrypted private line. It was not a congratulatory text. It was a link to a gossip column in the Denver Morning Post, forwarded to me by my head of public relations with a single question mark. The headline read, "Is local tech darling riding daddy's coattails? Sources say Bennett-Crowell merger, fueled by family ties." I felt the temperature in my blood drop to absolute zero. I clicked the link. The article was vague, citing insiders close to the Bennett family, who claimed that the massive acquisition of Nimbus Root was a favor called in by local developer Ethan Bennett to help his struggling daughter. It painted my decade of work, my patents, and my 60-hour weeks as a charity handout given by a billionaire to appease his golf buddy. I did not need a team of investigators to find the source. I recognized the phrasing. Struggling daughter. Help her get on her feet. These were not corporate terms. These were the exact pity-seeking phrases my father used at cocktail parties to make himself look like a benevolent patriarch. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of the only person who talked to the press from that social circle. Mrs. Gable, the head of my mother's charity committee. She answered on the second ring, sounding groggy. Harper, is everything okay? Did my father tell you he arranged this deal for me? I asked, skipping the pleasantries. Well, she stammered, clearly caught off guard. He mentioned at the club yesterday that he was facilitating things for you. He was very proud. He said he finally got Damien to look at your little project. I hung up. My father had been so terrified of me embarrassing him that he had preemptively destroyed my professional credibility to soothe his own ego. He couldn't handle the idea that I had succeeded on my own, so he had rewritten the narrative before the ink was even dry. I didn't win. He gave it to me. Then, the clock struck 6. The official press release from the Beacon Finance Network went live. The real headline flashed across the trading screens of the world. Nimbus Root acquires Crowell Fleet in $600 million strategic takeover. The sheer size of the number, 600 million, shattered the charity narrative instantly for anyone who knew how to count. But for my family, it did something far worse. It shattered their reality. My phone did not ring. It screamed, "You made me look like a fool!" Ethan Bennett did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. He was screaming so loud the microphone on his end was clipping, distorting his voice into a jagged roar. I am looking at the television. Harper, 600 million? You told me it was a shop. You let me go around town telling people you were fixing laptops. I never told you I fixed laptops. Dad, I said, my voice ice cold. You told people that because it was easier than learning what an API was. "You set me up!" he yelled. "You knew I was talking to Damien. You let me stand there at the gala and talk down to him about you. Do you know what he must think of me? He thinks I'm a clown. I called him a partner, and he knew. He knew the whole time he was buying you out for $500 million. He knew you didn't know," I corrected him, "which is worse. And now this." He was hyperventilating. "People are calling me. They are congratulating me on my strategy. They think I orchestrated this. What am I supposed to tell them? That I didn't know my own daughter was a CEO? You have humiliated me in front of the entire city." "You are welcome to tell them the truth," I said. "That you were too busy waiting for me to fail to notice I had won." "You selfish, ungrateful child!" My mother's voice pierced through the line. She must have been on the extension. "We gave you everything. We put you through school, and you hide this? You let your father look like an idiot to a billionaire? Do you have any idea how hard he has worked to get into that circle?" "I didn't hide it. Mom, I sent you the Capitol Record article last year. You used it as a coaster." "Oh, stop playing the victim," Madeline chimed in. They were all there, gathered around the speakerphone like a Greek chorus of toxicity. "You did this on purpose. Harper, you waited. You waited until Dad felt good about himself, and then you dropped this just to prove a point. You are jealous because Grant and I are happy and you are alone with your money. It is sick." I looked at the time. 6:10 in the morning. The market pre-trading was already reacting positively to the news. My net worth had jumped by $40 million in 10 minutes. "I'm going to send you an email," I said. "Check your inboxes. Now." "We do not want your emails," Ethan shouted. "I want you to fix this. You issue a statement saying I was a senior advisor. You give me credit for the introduction. You salvage my reputation. Harper, or so help me God." "I sent it," I said, hitting the enter key. On the other end of the line, I heard the ping of 3 phones simultaneously. "What is this?" Madeline asked. "It is a timeline," I explained, leaning back in my chair. "It is a chronological list of every interaction between Nimbus Route and Crowell Logistics. If you look at the first entry, you will see my initial pitch letter to Damien's acquisition team. It is dated 4 years ago. That is 3 years and 6 months before you ever met Damien Crowell." "Dad." I let that sink in. "I didn't use your name to get in the room," I continued, my voice steady and sharp as a scalpel. "I was already in the room when you met Damien 6 months ago. We were already in round 3 of negotiations. The only reason he took your call, Dad, the only reason he agreed to partner with you on that harbor deal, it wasn't because he liked your charm. It was because he was doing due diligence on me." "That is a lie," Ethan whispered. The fight was draining out of him, replaced by a horrifying realization. "It is all there in black and white," I said. "He used you to get a character reference on me, and you gave him one. You told him I was weak. You told him I was struggling. You told him exactly what he wanted to hear to try and lowball me on the price, but I beat him on the price anyway." I was trying to help," Ethan stammered. "I wanted to protect you from the pressure." "No," I said. "You wanted to be the only Bennett who mattered." "Mr. Bennett?" A new voice came through the line on their end. It sounded like an assistant or a secretary entering the room where they were huddled. "Sir, a courier just arrived from Crowell Capital. It is marked urgent." "Give it here," Ethan snapped. I heard the ripping of an envelope. I knew what was inside. I had not asked for it. But Damien was a man who cleaned up his loose ends. There was a long silence. Then, the sound of paper trembling. "What does it say?" "Ethan?" my mother asked, her voice trembling. He is terminating the harbor deal," Ethan choked out. "Effective immediately. Citing conflict of interest and breach of good faith." "What?" Madeline shrieked. "He can't do that." "He says—" Ethan's voice broke. He was reading the letter, and I could hear the devastation in every syllable. "He says that during the gala, I attempted to use undue influence to persuade him to abandon a strategic acquisition, the Nimbus Route deal, in favor of personal real estate interests. He says I tried to sabotage his business for my own gain. He is pulling the funding. The harbor project is dead. He thinks I tried to kill your deal? Ethan asked, his voice hollow. You did, Dad, I said. You told him not to buy the tech company. You didn't know it was me, but you tried to kill it. You tried to destroy my life's work to get a second warehouse built. Damien does not forgive sabotage. But if he pulls out, Ethan panicked. The loans, the bridge financing, I personally guaranteed the initial construction costs based on his letter of intent, if he walks. The bank calls the note. I will lose the house. I will lose everything. You should have read the fine print, I said. Or maybe you should have just asked me what I did for a living. Harper, please. My mother was crying now. You have to call him. You are the chairwoman now, right? You can fix this. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. Tell him your father didn't mean it. I cannot do that, I said. The new bylaws I signed this morning specifically forbid me from interfering in vendor relationships involving family members. It was a condition of the deal. I am legally blocked from saving you. You planned this, Madeline hissed. You cold-hearted bitch. I planned a merger, I said. You planned a gala. I looked at the red end call button on my desk phone. I didn't make you look like a fool, Dad, I said, delivering the final blow. You did that all by yourself. You wanted Damien Crowell to respect you? Well, he respects competence, and he despises people who do not know the value of what is sitting right across the dinner table from them. Harper, goodbye. Dad, I pressed the button. The line went dead. I sat there in the silence of my office. The sun was fully up now. The city below was waking up, oblivious to the fact that one of its prominent families had just imploded. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't joy. It wasn't even relief. It was just the feeling of a heavy weight, carried for 30 years. Finally being set down, I turned back to my monitor. The stock was up 8%. Elena, I spoke into the intercom, get me a coffee and schedule a meeting with the engineering team. We have a fleet to integrate. I had work to do, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have to apologize for it. 3 days after the press release shook the foundations of Denver's financial district, my father asked to meet. He did not demand it. He did not summon me to the house or order me to his office. He sent a text message asking if I had 30 minutes to spare for a coffee at a small cafe on 17th Street. The location told me everything. It was neutral ground. It was public. It was a place where you could not scream without making a scene. I arrived at 10 o'clock in the morning. The cafe was busy with the mid-morning rush, junior associates grabbing lattes, freelancers typing on laptops, the hum of the espresso machine drowning out the rain against the window. I saw him immediately in the back corner. Ethan Bennett had aged 10 years in 72 hours. He was wearing a suit, but the knot of his tie was slightly askew, and there was a stain on his cuff that he had not noticed. He was staring into a black coffee, as if the answers to his ruin were written in the steam. I slid into the chair opposite him. I placed my phone face down on the table. "Hello, Dad," I said. He looked up. His eyes were rimmed with red, the skin beneath them sagging like old parchment. He attempted a smile, but it fractured before it could form. "Harper," he said. His voice was raspy. "Thanks for coming. I know you are busy." With the transition, "I have 20 minutes, I said. I did not order anything. I just sat there, waiting. He nodded, rubbing his face with both hands. It was a gesture of exhaustion I had never seen him perform in public. Ethan Bennett was a man who practiced his posture in the mirror. To see him slump like this was jarring. "It is gone," he said softly. "The harbor project, the financing, all of it." "I know," I replied. "I saw the legal filing Crowell Capital sent over." "He pulled everything," Ethan said, and a sudden flash of the old anger sparked in his eyes. "Damien, he did not just cancel the new funding. He called in the bridge loans. He exercised the penalty clauses. He is demanding repayment of the initial $2 million by the end of the month. I do not have $2 million. Harper, everything is tied up in equity. If he forces this, I will have to liquidate the house. I will have to declare bankruptcy. He slammed his hand on the table, not loud enough to stop the room, but loud enough to make the barista glance over. He ruined my life, Ethan hissed. He smiled at my face, drank my wine, and then he gutted me. The man is a monster. I watched him quietly. I watched the way he framed himself as the victim of a natural disaster, rather than the architect of his own collapse. He is not a monster, I said. He is a businessman, and you are a liability. Ethan recoiled as if I had slapped him. How can you say that, after what he did to your father? I say it because it is the truth, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. You tried to kill his biggest deal of the year. You tried to manipulate him into dropping Nimbus Root because you were jealous of a tech company you knew nothing about. You tried to sabotage me. Dad, you just did not know it was me. I didn't know, he pleaded, leaning across the table. That is my point. If you had just told me, if you had just explained what you were doing. Stop, I said. The word was sharp enough to cut through his rambling. We are not doing this again, I said. We are not rewriting history to make you the victim of my silence. You want to know why you are in this mess? It is not because I didn't tell you. It is because you never listened. I leaned forward. The space between us felt charged, electric with the grievances of a decade. I have a question for you. Dad, I said, and I want you to answer it honestly. If you lie, I am walking out of this door and never coming back. He swallowed hard. Okay. Tell me one thing about Nimbus Root, I said. He blinked. What? My company, I said. The one you said was struggling. The one you told Damien was a bad investment. Tell me one thing about what we actually do. Not computers, not tech. Tell me one specific thing about the business model, the technology, or the client base. Just one thing that you knew before you read it in the newspaper 3 days ago. Ethan opened his mouth. He looked at me. He looked for the words. He searched his memory for a single conversation, a single moment where he had stopped talking about himself long enough to hear me. He looked for a detail. Anything. Did we make chips? Did we sell software? Did we work with hospitals? His mouth hung open slightly. The silence that followed was heavy. It was a physical weight in the center of the table. It stretched for 10 seconds, then 20. He couldn't do it. He sat there, the man who claimed to be my father, the man who claimed to be proud of me, and he realized he could not name a single fact about the work that had consumed the last 7 years of my life. He started, then stopped. He looked down at his hands. The shame was finally real. It wasn't the shame of losing money. It was the shame of being exposed as a fraud in his own home. You don't know, I stated. You never knew, because it didn't fit the picture you wanted to paint. Madeline was the socialite. I was the fixer-upper. That was the story. And you were so in love with that story that you nearly bankrupted yourself trying to keep it true. Ethan did not look up. His shoulders shook slightly. He whispered, I thought if I made it big, if I got the harbor deal, then I could help you. I wanted to be the one who took care of the family. I didn't need your help. Dad, I said, I needed you to ask me how my day was, and I needed you to actually care about the answer. I sat back. The anger had drained out of me, leaving only a dull ache. You are not going to lose the house, I said. He looked up, hope warring with confusion in his eyes. What? I spoke to Damien this morning, I said. I told him that while I cannot interfere in his business decisions, the public optics of bankrupting my parents would be distracting for the merger. He agreed to extend the repayment terms on your bridge loan. He is giving you 2 years to liquidate the assets and pay him back without interest. You will lose the harbor project, you will lose the company, but you will keep the house. Ethan let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Harper, thank you. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, I said. Because I didn't do it for you. I did it because I am tired of the drama. I want it to end. I checked my watch. I had a strategy meeting in 15 minutes. I have one condition, I said. Anything, he said. Anything you want. Mom invited me to dinner on Sunday, I said. She wants to pretend none of this happened. She wants to invite the Wexlers and act like we are one big happy dynasty. Ethan nodded eagerly. Yes, please come. We can celebrate. We can toast to your success. I will tell Grant everything. I will tell him my daughter is a visionary. No, I cut him off. He froze. If I come to dinner, I said, my voice hard, you are not going to brag about me. You are not going to use my net worth to win a measuring contest with Grant Wexler. You are not going to take credit for my hard work. I stood up, smoothing down my blazer. If I walk into that house and you introduce me as the tech genius or the CEO, I will turn around and walk out. You will introduce me as Harper. You will ask me about the drive over. You will ask me if I'm tired. And you will listen to the answer. I looked down at him. He looked small in the chair, stripped of his pretenses. I am done being a prop for your ego. Dad, you want a relationship with me? You build it with the person, not the title. Can you do that? Ethan looked up at me. For the first time, I saw respect in his eyes. Not the respect for money, but the fear and respect one feels when facing something stronger than themselves. I can, he whispered. I will try. Good, I said. I picked up my bag. One last thing, I added. You said Damien ruined your life. He didn't. He just turned on the lights. You were the one standing in the dark. I turned and walked toward the door. Harper? He called out. I paused, my hand on the brass handle, but I did not look back. I really didn't know, he said, his voice cracking. I am sorry. I know, I said. I pushed the door open and stepped out onto the rainy street. The cool air hit my face, washing away the smell of stale coffee and regret. Inside the cafe, Ethan Bennett sat alone with a cold cup of coffee and a silence he had spent a lifetime creating. He had his house, he had his safety. But as I walked away, disappearing into the crowd of people who were busy building their own realities, I knew he had lost the one thing money couldn't buy back. He had lost the right to pretend he knew me. The lobby of the Nimbus Route headquarters was buzzing with the kind of electric energy that only money can generate. Reporters from the Northline Business Daily were setting up tripods near the reception desk. Analysts from major hedge funds were checking their watches, waiting for the lift to the executive suite. It was the morning of the closing. I was upstairs in the boardroom, watching the feed from the lobby security cameras on a side monitor. At 8:45 in the morning, 15 minutes before the signing ceremony was set to broadcast to the global markets. My father walked through the revolving doors. Ethan Bennett was wearing his best suit, a navy pinstripe that he usually reserved for weddings and funerals. He walked with his chest puffed out, smiling at the receptionists, waving vaguely at a reporter he did not know. He looked like a man arriving to collect his trophy. He marched straight toward the security turnstiles, bypassing the guest sign-in kiosk. I watched as the head of building security, a man named Miller who took his job very seriously, stepped into Ethan's path. Sir, Miller said, his voice audible through the microphone feed. I need you to step back. It is fine, Miller, Ethan said, flashing a charming, dismissive smile. I am Ethan Bennett, Harper's father. I am here for the signing. Damien Crowell is expecting me. We are partners. My father reached for his pass, the visitor pass he had kept from a previous lunch, thinking it gave him permanent access to my world. Miller did not move. He glanced down at the tablet in his hand. I am sorry. Mr. Bennett, Miller said, his tone professional but firm. Your access credentials have been revoked. You are not on the guest list for the 42nd floor. Revoked? Ethan laughed. A nervous, jagged sound. Check again. There must be a glitch in the system. I am the father of the CEO. I am the one who facilitated this meeting. There is no glitch, sir, Miller said. I have a specific directive from the legal department. It is the non-interference and conflict protocol. All immediate family members of the executive board are barred from the premises during the transition period. That includes you. Ethan's face went pale. He looked around the lobby. The reporters were starting to turn their heads. The cameras were shifting focus from the elevators to the man arguing with the security guard. "Call Damien," Ethan demanded, his voice rising. "Call Damien Crowell right now. Tell him Ethan is here. He will clear this up." Up in the boardroom, Damien Crowell was sitting across from me. His phone was lying face up on the glass table. It lit up. Ethan Bennett calling. Damien looked at the phone. He looked at me. The room was silent. The lawyers, the bankers, and the executives were all watching. Damien reached out and pressed the red button. He declined the call. Then he flipped the phone face down. "Shall we?" Damien asked me, gesturing to the contract, down in the lobby. Ethan stared at his phone as the call went to voicemail. The color drained from his face. He looked at the turnstiles, then at the elevator he could not enter. He realized, finally, that the glass ceiling he had hit was not made of glass. It was made of the very contract clauses his daughter had written. "Sir," Miller said, stepping closer, "I need to ask you to leave the building. You are causing a disturbance." I just wanted to see her," Ethan stammered. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a crushing humiliation. "You can watch it on the screens, sir," Miller said, pointing to the massive LED wall above the reception desk. "The live stream is starting now." Ethan turned. He stood alone in the middle of the lobby, surrounded by strangers, and looked up at the giant screen. The feed cut to the boardroom. The image was crisp and high definition. It showed me sitting at the head of the table, pen in hand. Damien Crowell sat to my right. I did not look like the struggling daughter. I did not look like someone who needed help paying rent. I looked like a titan. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damien began, speaking into the microphones arranged on the table. "Today marks a historic shift in the logistics industry. Crowell Capital is proud to integrate with Nimbus Wrote AI." Damien paused. He looked directly into the camera lens. It felt like he was looking right at Ethan down in the lobby. "There has been some speculation in the press regarding the nature of this deal," Damien said smoothly. "Let me be clear. We are not acquiring a legacy. We are acquiring a future. This merger is the result of singular merit. Harper Bennett built this technology from the ground up, without handouts, without nepotism, and frankly, without anyone in this city realizing what she was capable of until it was too late to catch her." Ethan stood frozen in the lobby. The words hit him like physical blows. Without handouts, without nepotism. "She is the most formidable operator I have ever met," Damien continued, "and I am honored to serve on her board." I watched the security feed on my side monitor. Ethan's shoulders slumped. He looked around, terrified that someone would recognize him as the partner he had claimed to be. But nobody was looking at him. They were all looking at the screen, at me. He was not a VIP. He was not a player. He was just a spectator in the cheap seats, at home. In the living room of the house that was now mortgaged to the hilt to pay back Damien's bridge loan. My mother and Madeline were watching the same feed. Madeline sat on the sofa, a glass of wine halfway to her mouth. She watched Damien Crowell, the man she had desperately wanted to impress at the gala, shake my hand with genuine reverence. She watched the way the room deferred to me. She watched me sign the document that increased my net worth to a number she could not even conceptualize. "She looks," my mother whispered, her voice trembling. "She looks powerful." "She looks cold," Madeline spat, but there was no venom in it. Only fear. They were realizing that the hierarchy of the family had just been inverted. The daughter they had pitied was now the son, and they were just cold planets drifting in the dark. Back in the boardroom, the signing was complete. The applause broke out, polite and enthusiastic. A reporter from Northline Business Daily raised a hand. "Ms. Bennett," the reporter asked. This is a massive achievement for a founder under 40. There are rumors that your family connections played a role in bringing Crowell Capital to the table. What is your response to critics who say you had a head start? I looked at the camera. I imagined my father standing in the lobby. I imagined my mother on her couch. I had no head start, I said. My voice was calm, amplified clearly through the speakers in the lobby and the living room. I started 10 miles behind the starting line because I had to build my own road while everyone else was taking the highway. I am not here because of who my father knows. I am here because of what I know. I paused, letting the silence hold the weight of the moment. I did not shrink myself to fit into anyone's imagination, I said. And I certainly did not wait for permission to be great. Down in the lobby, Ethan Bennett turned away from the screen. He could not watch anymore. He pulled his coat collar up, hiding his face, and pushed through the revolving doors, stepping out onto the gray, rainy sidewalk. He had come to claim credit. He left as a ghost. The weeks that followed were quiet. The harbor project was formally dissolved. Ethan's company, Bennett Harbor Properties, filed for restructuring. He managed to save the house, thanks to the grace period I had negotiated, but his days as a developer were over. He took a job as a regional property manager for a rental car chain. It was honest work. It paid the bills, but it required him to wear a name tag and answer to a boss who was half his age. He stopped going to the country club. He stopped throwing galas. He stopped talking about vision. I sat in my new office on the top floor of the merged headquarters. The view was panoramic. I could see the entire city, from the tech district to the distant suburbs where my sister lived her curated life. I had the integration plans spread out on my desk. There were trucking routes to optimize, databases to merge, and 1,000 employees looking to me for leadership. I picked up my pen. I did not feel a surge of wicked glee. I did not feel the need to call my father and gloat. I felt something better. I felt peace. They could no longer define me. They could no longer tell people I was struggling to make themselves feel taller. The scoreboard was lit up, and the numbers didn't lie. My father had spent his life terrified that I would embarrass him. In the end, I had saved him from total ruin, but I had forced him to live with the one thing he hated most: the truth. I turned back to my work. The city was moving, the supply chains were flowing, and I was exactly where I belonged, at the head of the table. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let me know your location so we can connect. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Morgan Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get recommended to more people. Your support means the world to me.